sharing memories and talking about a legendary human being and musician who I can safely say has left some impact on each and every one of us here. What better way can there be to spend a rainy afternoon? What is it that makes somebody a legend? We throw that word around so freely, but truly just a handful of people really deserve that label. When you think about it, it's a combination of factors, some of which can be baffling, inexplicable, magical, mystical, as well as a downright obvious, regular, normal, and expected. Talent, passion, brilliance, hard work, personality, packaging and marketing, good luck, connections, money, charisma, that mysterious X factor, and legacy, and some magical force that binds them all together. There are people who were legends in their lifetime but whose fame faded away after their lives. There were those who are unknown and unlauded during their lives but gained fame later. And the best of all worlds, those who made waves while alive and continue to do so well after their lifetime. Which will it be for MS Subbalakshmi? It has been 12 years since her voice has been stilled, and here we are talking about her. When I think of her, her life, her music, her rise to fame and accomplishments, her image and legacy, I can't help but think that she would make the perfect case study for Harvard Business School. And I mean this in the best possible way. I think all of us here have at least some notion about her background in life, where she came from, and her remarkable journey from provincial Madurai to the most glittering of the world's concert stages. And it's truly amazing that this performer of Carnatic music, this music that such a small segment of the world's population is even aware of, and that an even smaller segment enjoys, that this person has become a household name throughout India and in many parts of the world. Today's musicians who are so social media savvy and spend so much of their energy on marketing and promotion can learn a thing or two from her. All this is very well, but really, MS's legacy in the years ahead lies, in some part at least, in the hands of the young musicians of today who will play a role in deciding what lives on and what fades away. So with this in mind, Samirji wanted me to address some specific questions. What is the influence of the music of MS on today's musicians? What do these musicians think is her legacy for the future? And what elements in her music do young musicians think will live on? I have to say, I was a bit flattered initially. Me, a young musician? I was quickly brought down to earth when I realized that the young musicians he had in mind were busy being, well, young musicians, and that I was to serve the role of communicator and intermediary, as well as provide my own insights. So I exchanged emails and spoke to several young musicians who are both in India as well as the United States. None of them have listened to MS's music live. Several were still school kids when she passed away. So she was not a part of their musical universe the way she was when I was growing up. They have never experienced the aura of a live MS concert, which no YouTube video, no CD, no description can ever convey or capture. They have a whole new generation of musicians to look up to admire, emulate, learn from, and critique. And yet, and completely unsurprisingly, they had all heard about her. They were, to the last person, more aware of her life story, her background, her best-known songs, than they were of many of her contemporaries, like M.L. Vasantakumari, D.K. Pattamal, Brinda, Mukta, Shemangudi, etc. I found this fascinating. I think the best way to share what these young musicians think about MS is to give you their thoughts in their own words. When I asked these youngsters about what they thought about MS and her musical legacy, I assured them that they would remain anonymous so that they might be free and unrestrained in their comments. What I did not want was something along the lines of, well, she was a saint, she was the greatest ever. I asked for something more introspective, more analytical, and they wowed me with their responses. So these are people who are steeped in Carnatic music, not mere hobbyists. I will read out some selected passages from their responses, and then I will try to summarize my impressions of their impressions. So here's musician number one. I have to say honestly that I actually did not grow up listening to much of MS's music. I have only actually been exposed to her music sporadically within the last couple of years. In fact, in the context of starting to take vocal lessons and hence needing to pay closer attention to vocal articulations and methods. Taking in her music as an adult, she really sounded very different from what I had expected or imagined. She had a kind of raw style of vocalizing and directness of delivery that is no more to be found in the age of amplification. I noticed this particularly in a record of MS singing Muttaya Bhagavatar's Kamas Daru Varnam Mate Malaya Dhwaja. The virtuosic fluidity of the brisk gamakas and the fast repetitions, the simple and understated way in which the word Shami was rendered, the intense steadiness and clarity of her voice whenever she held a note. These are sounds we rarely hear in contemporary performance. Nevertheless, I think it's interesting to consider MS as a historical figure in light of all the expectations we continue to project onto female performers in Carnatic music. My rough sense of this is that MS's music had many dimensions to it, but only a portion of these were later branded and marketed for the national and international stages. Today, the same branding and marketing strategies persist, but they have unfortunately become the rubric within which many female singers and instrumentalists define their aesthetic identities and desires. So, if MS does indeed continue to figure in the Carnatic imaginary of the future, I hope that the full breadth and possibility of her music is incorporated. That is, not just the image that has come to be so widely circulated and celebrated as a bastion of tradition and conventional Brahmin gender roles. Here is another young musician. These are his/her words. I honestly don't know why MS Subbalakshmi is such a big deal. Just that she is. I knew her name before I heard her sing, and I never had the pleasure of discovering a new artist. In that way, MS reminds me of Shakespeare. I had heard about him as being the greatest writer of all time before I had read a word that he had written. So there was so much pressure on liking him when I finally encountered his plays in school. And even then, I could never distinguish early on whether I really did like him or whether I was convincing myself that I liked him. It was only quite late that I felt confident that I had my own connection to Shakespeare, that I could speak about why I liked his plays genuinely. In a culture that likes to worship heroes and heroines, where the pressure to admire the greats is especially palpable, it is harder to find the space to develop that personal relationship. It's harder to be someone or find someone courageous enough to genuinely ask, why actually do we care about this woman? And what is all this hype about? I haven't really read much into these things, but I do get the sense that the space is opening up slowly, with more people feeling comfortable talking about the fact that MS's background doesn't exactly fit the mold of the traditional Tamil Brahmin woman. I think the fact that MS, the icon of musical tradition, is non-traditional in surprising ways, and that is very cool. And I would like to see that become a part of her legacy in a tradition that sometimes insists too much on purity. Now these are my words, just a few words of explanation before I move forward. The word Bani in the Carnatic music context is very roughly equivalent to the Hindustani gharana or school or style of music. It is always connected to an individual, a particular musician's idiosyncrasies or strengths or even weaknesses become part of his or her Bani. It seems like the 1940s to 1970s spawned most of the Carnatic Banis that are mentioned to this day. Now, back to the words of another young musician friend. I would argue that MS's legacy is much more cultural than that of other musicians. We can point out a Shemangudi Bani, or a GNV style, or even a Brinda Mukta Bani, but less often do we hear about an MS musical style, pure and simple. What we hear instead is MS's name connected to a color of a sari, a specific timbre of voice that we can no longer dissociate from the chanting of stotrams, songs that no one can sing without invoking the ghost of MS. Even if Shemmangudi had sung Marubalga thousands of times and was known for singing it, artists can still sing it as just a song, not a Shemmangudi song. Not so with Kurai Ondrumille. Even if you say absolutely nothing, it will be heard as a tribute to MS. It's really remarkable how iconic MS has become through her image, her famous songs, and her stotrams, so iconic that they're irreplaceable. Think of her Vishnu Sahasranamam, Venkata Suprabhatam, Bhaja Govindam. It has to be her way or no other way. More than leaving behind a legacy within Carnatic music, since there is no MS Bani, it seems to me that what MS did was to redefine Carnatic music's place in South Indian culture, and particularly Tamil Brahmin culture. I know many people for whom Carnatic music means MS Subbalakshmi. It must have something to do with the fact that she was also on the silver screen and also reached a wider audience and also appealed to religious sentiment. I don't know whose decision it was, but I like the fact that MS's music managed to expand the reach of Carnatic music, and that her musical philosophy must have included a commitment to touching more and more people. MS in the blue sari singing a Ragam Tanam Pallavi, MS holding the jingchucks while singing devotional songs, and MS singing Maitreem Bhajata at the UN are all equally important images of her. I hope that her legacy in our generation will involve this commitment to taking Carnatic music where it usually doesn't go, and to privilege that openness to the world over the mad fury with purity that sometimes threatens to close Carnatic music off. And here are the words of yet another young musician. Overall, her music to me was associated with bhakti and religiosity. Her voice was nostalgia for me, of my grandmother and her generation. And the nervous busyness and excitement that surrounded festivals, pujas, weddings, etc. I didn't listen to her a ton from a Carnatic perspective to learn new repertoire and technicalities, etc. But her open-throated approach, sharp pronunciation, even if not appropriate for non-South Indian languages, a complaint I heard from many, and her really amazing adherence to Shruti or pitch. I rarely ever heard an off-Shruti moment, but things I picked up on and consciously or unconsciously tried to imbibe. In terms of her as a cultural figure or icon, I don't know the accurate history of her life, but I do feel like her image was constructed by the Tamil Brahmin community as a sort of beacon of piety and perfection, which I personally don't find appealing at this stage of my life. I think it reinforced oppressive views of what women should wear, sound like, sing about. The manager vibe of her husband was also a bit off-putting, especially since he seemed to be very much in control and making the decisions, while she was the one with the talent, charm, and X factor. And one more short reply from another musician who is clearly not a fan. I have never really thought about her music, nor do I think much of it. So as you can see, now this is back to my summarization, the youngsters are all aware of MS Subbalakshmi and beyond her music. And as you can tell, these are extremely smart, extremely articulate, extremely analytical people. The socio-cultural part of her story stood out for them, that a non-Brahmin gained such approval and adoration within the tightly knit and insular Tamil Brahmin community. And the feminists chafed at the notion that she was so controlled and managed by her husband. I was frankly blown away by their responses. Something about her story, about her stretching and breaking boundaries, the streak of unconventionality in an outwardly conventional life, caught everybody's attention. Even if MS's music per se is not something that they have listened to or thought about in depth or even liked. They are aware of the bigger universe that she is a part of. And for all the packaging and marketing that they are aware that contributed to her image and legacy, they admire the fact that, paradoxical as it may seem, she was true to herself. That even with the diversity of places she performed in and audiences she performed for and the kinds of songs she sang, there was a core something that remained constant, that she was true to all her life. So what do I think will be her legacy? More than the actual music, an aura, a mystique, the story of a life that was complex and with issues that may not resonate with the musicians of the future, but a life that was lived to the full nonetheless. When I was young and growing up in Madras, if we went for a walk early in the morning, every house had the Venkatesha Suprabhatam blaring out of it. No more. You go for a walk, you hear TV sounds blaring, or you hear nothing. I don't know. It's kind of sad. Maybe people are listening to them on their headphones or iPods. I hope so. So what were some of the elements in MS's formula? She set herself apart and was true to herself. She created a need and a niche that wasn't there earlier. She let her passion and vision guide her, but she also kept her finger on the pulse of her audience and her world and was prepared to adapt and try new things. And she worked very hard and never stopped learning. And she presented her work in a form that was aesthetically pleasing to all the senses and hardest of all to achieve, to the soul. MS did all this. I truly believe that whether you like MS's music or not, brilliant packaging and marketing or not, everyone will agree that that core, that heart, steady and shining, was the source of her radiance and legacy. And its glow will live for a long time to come. Thank you.